Good morning. That was pretty good, but like not quite there. Good morning. Much better. I am really grateful to be with you this morning. I'm particularly grateful to Rabbi David, who we've built relationships, as he was saying. We have this group that we slowed our meeting down a little bit at this point. But just, it was such a source of strength and also a space where we could just be honest on those days where we were like, what is happening in our country? And so really thankful for your friendship and for inviting me here, for those of you who were able to make last night and all of you who came today. And I specifically want to thank young people who I look forward to talking to in a little bit more intimately later. And those of you who will join the tech study. We'll be exploring ecological justice themes from this portion in Exodus. And I also just want to take a moment to thank my New Roots family. Would you mind standing, guys? I know you don't like me to put you on the spot, but I'm going to ask you. I want to really be grateful for this community of folks who are just really trying to figure out how do we reflect what we believe God calls us to in terms of living into the radical kind of love, family, and friendship that not just we need, but that the world needs in this time. And especially to one member, to my husband, Ron, who has the job of getting me here and and just being a partner in so many great things. So with that, I'm going to jump in because Rabbi Leonard did tell me that I should not flow over the time or else he's going to hear about it. He said you might be a little bit nicer to me, but that if he goes 1 minute over, like 15 to 16 minutes, he hears about it. So anyway, my sermon this morning will draw from the 1959 speech by Dr. King, Remaining Awake Through a Great Revolution. Remaining Awake Through a Great Revolution. I encourage you to go ahead and read it. It's not terribly long, but I often tend to reference many of his speeches that people hear less because he was a great rhetorician and he obviously painted amazing pictures, but he also really wrestled with some of the moral challenges of those times. And when I take the time to read so much of what he talked about, I both recognize ways in which we have moved forward and also how much the human dilemma is the same. In this speech, Dr. King's prophetic ethic was on full display as he grappled with the issues of his time. It was a time of intense change in the world. In fact, he describes it as one of the greatest revolutions the world has ever known. Although I want to tell him, I'd love to have a conversation with him because I'm I think we're kind of getting it even more than you could have imagined. On one hand, there is major technological change happening. The space race is in full tilt. New countries and formations are emerging, and people are imagining new possibilities. From desegregation in America to decolonization in Africa, the winds of freedom and change are flowing around the world. And many of those gains don't just come easily. People have to fight and struggle. There's war and strife as folks try to figure out how to become who we are called to be. He first offered this speech at Morehouse College as a challenge to the graduating class. The young men he is addressing are probably not too unlike himself, as he also was a graduate of Morehouse. And they are on the precipice of moving into the next stage of their journey. And so Dr. King both encourages them in the choices that they will make and challenges them to think deeply about how they will live and move in the world. And so he opens the speech with a cautionary tale of Rip Van Winkle. Now, he doesn't really actually talk about it that much, and I'm assuming that back then more people knew the story of Rip Van Winkle, but I'm assuming that not enough of us know that story. So let me just give you the Cliff Notes version. For those of you you who don't know, Rip Van Winkle was a short story published by Washington Irving in 1819. While it is one of the early American short stories, in fact, this is the beginning of short story becoming a more popular form, it is worth noting that it has connections with the story of Peter Klaus in Germany, that there is an early Christian story of the 7 sleepers of Ephesus that also shows up in the Surah of Islam with some similar ideas, and it has a thematic link to the tale of Honim Hamagal in Judaism. I hope I said that correctly. So the story of Rip Van Winkle is that he is a Dutch American guy living in colonial America, and he's not the hardest working fellow out there. He wakes up one day and his wife has a list of things that she would like for him to accomplish that he is not terribly interested in. And so he decides to take his dog for a walk into the Catskill Mountains. While he is there, he bumps into a guy who asks him to help carry a keg, which is work he is interested in doing. And the two of them then go join a group of guys with beards bowling in the woods. Yes, I said bowling. When I said it, they were playing 9-pin. And I was like, this must be a tin whistle. No, it was literally like bowling, 9 bowling pins. I don't quite know how they pulled that off. But anyway, so they're all drinking, and Rip gets drunk, lays down, and then wakes up in the morning, back where he met the guy with the keg. As he wakes, he notices that his dog is not there. I guess he just didn't keep watch with him over the night. He also notices that his beard is significantly longer than he remembered and grayer than he remembered. And thinking that this must be the worst hangover ever, he starts to walk back home. And he gets to his town, and it is larger than he remembers. And someone asks him who he voted for in the recent election, and he proclaims his loyalty to King George. He sees someone who looks like a younger version of himself, who is also calling himself Rip, and he's like, where does this guy get off? And then he meets a younger woman who says that her father was Rip Van Winkle and that he had disappeared 20 years ago and hasn't been seen since. He learns that his wife has passed and that it has literally been 20 years since he left. And in that time, the American Revolution has happened, and so much has changed. He literally slept through the shot heard around the world. So Dr. King lifts up this story and cautions the Morehouse grads that the tragedy of Rip Van Winkle is that in seeking his own comfort and running away from his responsibility, Rip misses out on one of the most important moments of his time. And I can certainly concur that it is terrible for young people or any people to lose the opportunity to offer their gifts to the world. Healthy, functioning societies require engaged, informed citizens. But this morning I want to acknowledge a deeper danger I see in this story. See, I imagine that when Rip wakes up, once he gets through the shock, that on the whole, he thought, things seemed better than when I was asleep, and quite frankly, I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to lift a finger for any of it. Similar to how Dr. King describes what's happening in 1959, much of what Rip saw probably felt like progress. However, it is worth noting that he could have woken up to a completely different reality. He could have woken up to an America where even more people were sick and enslaved. He could have awakened to a world where the American Revolution was an endless war of conflict, two sides going back and forth, no one really winning, lives being constantly lost. Wars that never end, conflicts passed down from generation to generation, with only the continuation of suffering. The truth is that a war of only 8 years, in some instances, is relatively short within human history. Change is inevitable, but progress is not. I am thankful that Rip woke up to a better world, but I also recognize that when people decide it is too hard to face change, when they walk away, go to sleep, drown in their sorrows, or just hide in a cave until things get better, that it is often our greater demons rather than our better angels that prevail. And I'm here just in case you might have thought that the best response to this moment is just to take a walk in the woods and hope that it blows over. I'm here just in case you might have thought we could lean into this time by just keeping our holy schedules, going to work or school every day, and just trying to stay out of the things that we think are just like too political. Some of you may even be tapping into your own keg of overworking, sports betting, doom scrolling, video games, or even obsessive cleaning. I mean, whatever it is, that thing you use to block out the world and your responsibility to it. I find that even excessive religious practice can be an idol if, as Rabbi Heschel says, we don't also pray with our feet. In this season in the world, we are called to lean in. And not just to survive the revolutions of our time, but to actively work to build and bend the arc of the universe towards justice. This lesson is one that Jewish people have tried to faithfully hold up to the world through the remembering of the Holocaust. But we are all in danger of forgetting the lessons of our past, especially when we allow people to start actively repressing or rewriting history. In 2025, we are in a revolutionary moment. And it is actually simplistic to reduce it to Republicans versus Democrats, or the city versus the suburbs, baby boomers versus millennials, 6-7, immigrants versus natives, or even black versus white. The struggle is not against two opposing peoples, but against two opposing forces. The struggle is one between moral imagination and fear and discrimination. It is about whether we believe that we, the people, is actually about all of us. Whether we trust that God knew what God was talking about when we were called in Leviticus 19 to love our neighbors as ourselves. And I want to just take a moment to say that I believe Leviticus 19 is an expression of the motherly side of God. Because God doesn't just give the big description, but also adds some nagging details that are reflective of someone who knows what it is to have children, who will find a way to argue that an unmade bed, crusty pizza plate, and clothes stuffed into drawers can constitute a clean room. The struggle is between those who believe that there isn't enough for all of us and those who believe that if we follow God's command to love our neighbor as ourselves, there are truly enough for us all. The struggle is between those of us who would choose a vision of a technocratic, independent society where some have everything that they could ever imagine and others struggle to make ends meet. And those of us who are ready for a declaration of interdependence, believing that it's time to stop focusing only on what I need and want and imagine that we can build something that's enough for us all. I was tempted to think that Dr. King, thanks for your words, but you don't quite understand all of what we are struggling through. But I became convinced of this need for a declaration of interdependence not just because we are celebrating the sesquicentennial of our country, but because if you turn later in the speech, Dr. King also recognized this need. And he said to these young men, if you go home, sit down and do nothing about the revolution we are witnessing, you will be a victim of dangerous optimism. The geographical togetherness of the modern world makes our very existence dependent on coexistence. We must all learn to live together as brothers, or we will all perish together as fools. Because of our involvement in humanity, we must be concerned about every human being. Quite frankly, I would say the beings beyond human. We'll talk about that this afternoon. All of this amounts to saying that in the final analysis, all life is interrelated. No nation or individual is independent. We are interdependent. I love the passage in Ezekiel because I think that it raises that reality. We can cling to the illusion. We can do our own thing, be our own thing. But this is the place where Dr. King says we are caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality. And I was shocked to find this. A second challenge facing us this day of revolution is to keep our moral and spiritual development in line with our scientific and technological growth. Moral stagnancy is not only intolerable, but suicidal in a day when the rivers of science and technology are constantly flowing to larger oceans of fulfillment. An understanding of a man's present predicament may be found in the distinction between civilization and culture. Professor Massever of Columbia University, following the German sociologist Alfred Weber, has clearly set forth the distinction. Civilization refers to the things we use, culture to what we are. Civilization is the complex of devices, mechanisms, techniques, and instrumentalism by means of which we live. Culture is the realm of spiritual ends expressed in art, literature, morals, and religion, for which, at best, we live. The great problem confronting man today is that he has allowed his civilization to outdistance his culture. He has allowed his mentality to outrun his morality. He has allowed his technology to outdistance his theology. He has allowed the means by which he lives to tower above the ends for which he lives. How much of our modern life can be summarized in the shrewd diction of the poet Thoreau: improved means to an unimproved end. I believe that this moment that we are seeing in our country is a moment of collective anxiety as we recognize that we have more than we've ever had, and we are spiritually poorer for it. And I am grateful to serve a God who does his best work when we are falling apart. Dr. King issued this call to young black men in 1959, but it is more relevant than ever in our time. It is still a call to young people, but I think it is a call to all people, and particularly to people of faith. It is a call to those of us who understand that God's law is specific, not because God wants to restrict our imagination, but because God wants us to be honest and accountable for living in the way that we can and we should. God is like that mother who recognizes that at some point you are going to leave the house for which she is grateful. And that giving you those boundaries are part of what helps you to move and to grow wings into that next part of your life. It is a call for us to take up our responsibility, to face this moment with moral imagination and courage. As Rabbi Lerner mentioned, even now, our neighbors in Minnesota are facing masked agents hunting people. Folks are being detained because their skin is too brown, their accent is too strong, they're walking in the wrong neighborhood. School is canceled because children are afraid to go through those doors. People are afraid to drive because they've seen scenes of people being rammed by ICE pickup trucks. Those of us whose ancestors were hunted by slave catchers or Gestapo are called to stand in this moment and name that we have seen this before and that we can and must do better. But it is not enough to just respond to this moment and try to just bring ourselves back to the status quo that was before. It is not enough to just stand for the rule of law. We must also tap into our moral imagination that we can be better, that we can build a country where we, the people, means all of people. On this 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, I believe that we, as people of faith, who are rooted in something for which 250 years is kind of like a drop in the bucket, are called to say that it is a time for us to imagine even beyond what the forefathers of this country were able to do in this time. They stretched pretty far. It was a big deal how much they imagined. And they sometimes had to send their wives and their slaves out of the room while they said these things because they didn't want them to get the wrong idea about whether or not they were included. And so we can both celebrate from whence we are come. We can rise up and just try to stop what has happened. Or we can do what I hope will become the charge of all people of faith throughout this country and throughout this world. We can rise up with moral imagination that faces this revolutionary moment and imagines how our theology and our morality might imagine for us a revolutionary new reality.